Hello and welcome to Past, Present, and Occult with me, Emiliano Noriega Petty. In today's episode, we'll explore the O.T.O, the religion/philosophy of Thelema, and the man at the center of both, Aleister Crowley. Before we begin our video, I do want to give a quick disclaimer. Unlike the Rosicrucians and Golden Dawn, I am in fact a member of the O.T.O by being a member of the EGC. When I was much younger, I used to visit Star Sapphire Lodge. I wanted to become more involved, and because of this I went through the baptismal ceremony in the EGC that qualifies me for the rank of child, and this allows me to fill the role of child during the Gnostic Mass. During the Gnostic Mass, there are two roles filled by people who are called children, but it's mostly filled by adults. One wears black, one wears white, and we mostly stare at each other for the majority of the Gnostic Mass. If you want to know exactly what we do, I heavily encourage you to go see one. Before we talk about the O.T.O, what does O.T.O even stand for? It stands for Ordo Templi Orientis. Now, what does that mean in English? Well, translated, it either means the Order of the Temple of the East or Order of Oriental Templars. Both of these translations are accepted by the modern-day O.T.O. The O.T.O was originally founded by a man named Karl Kellner. He was a wealthy industrialist and he came from Austria. His original goal with founding the O.T.O was to create an Academia Masonica, and an Academia Masonica, for those of you who don't know, is a Freemason body in which the higher degrees of Freemasonry can be given. Karl Kellner was a Freemason, and he wanted to do this so that those degrees could finally be given in German-speaking countries. So how do we get from this original intent to the order that Aleister Crowley ends up becoming a part of and changing quite a bit once he becomes a part of it? Well, this is how. Part of trying to put the O.T.O together would involve Karl Kellner meeting a man named Theodor Reuss. Now, Reuss was very much involved in the occult, and he was very responsible for getting occult brotherhoods going in France, Denmark, Switzerland, and the United States. When he finalized the order along with Kellner's help, it was originally an order that consisted of a body of 10 degrees, and 5 of those degrees were specifically Masonic degrees. Continuing with Reuss's story, in the year 1902, he and several other gentlemen purchased the right to perform the rite of Memphis Mizraim, that's a particular type of Freemasonry, from the English Freemason John Yarker. They were again given that authority in 1904 and 1905. These rites in Masonry are considered to be irregular, but they, along with the rite that is known as the Swedenborgian rite, formed the essential meat of what you could call the O.T.O at this time. Another thing that occurred near or around this time was that Kellner, Reuss, and several other gentlemen were given the authority to perform the rites of the Martinist order after they met Gerard and Casas, who happened to be a rather high-ranking occultist. They were also given the right to perform a clandestine version of the Scottish rite from Joseph Cernu. Finally, during this time as well, Reuss was able to meet William Wynn Westcott, who you might remember from my last video, and from Westcott he was given a warrant to start a college of the Societas Rosicruciana in Anglia. However, this one he happened to found in Germany. Another thing that occurred during this time is he began to publish a journal known as the Oriflamme, and when I say he, I mean Reuss. It was a collection of the rites that they had put together, and ultimately this caused a lot of negative publicity for him, and he was ultimately kicked out of regular Freemasonry because of this issue. Funnily enough, as part of leaving Masonry, he would leave Germany and go to London in the year 1906. Now, you have to remember Freemasonry is all over the world, so being kicked out of Freemasonry in Germany doesn't necessarily mean that he has no reason to go to London. Remember, the Freemasons who he's trying to avoid are German Freemasons, not London-based ones. However, moving to London would cause him to lose control of the German orders that he had founded at this time. The next most significant event to occur within the history of the O.T.O happens in 1908 when Gerard and Casas invites Reuss to a Masonic conference or an international Masonic assembly, and during this conference he happens to meet representatives of the EGC, or the Iglesia Gnostica Catholica. I won't go into too much detail on the EGC in this part of the video. All you have to know is that it serves as the ecclesiastical or the religious arm of the O.T.O from this point onward in history. If you're wondering what I mean by ecclesiastical arm, I mean it's the part of the O.T.O that provides the religious aspect to the entire organization. It's where their deacons, priests, and bishops come from. Now, this sets the stage for what the O.T.O ultimately is in the modern time in terms of how the organization looks in a very basic way. The O.T.O is actually two organizations. It's the MMM and the EGC. The EGC, as I just mentioned, is the Gnostic Catholic Church, or Iglesia Gnostica Catholica, while the MMM is the Mysteria Mystica Maxima. Both of these groups make up the entire OTO. One part, the Mysteria Mystica Maxima, is in charge of taking care of the initiatory part of the OTO's mission. The EGC takes part of the religious, quote-unquote, part of the OTO's mission. For those of you who are not members of the OTO, the part that you will interact with first is in fact the EGC, or Gnostic Catholic Church, because the ceremony that they open up to the public, which is called the Gnostic Mass, is performed by officers of the EGC. I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, let's go back to Kellner and Reuss. So they've gotten all of these different authorities within all of these different magical orders, and what they're going to try to do with the OTO is make the OTO a one-stop shop for all of the secrets and mysteries, along with techniques that you might have learned in all of these other initiatory bodies. So they're not going to tell the public the secrets of all of these other orders. They're just going to try to make the OTO the one place you could go to learn the best and ultimate version of all of these secrets. Now let me put a pin in the history section of this video here because I want to do a quick recap. So by this time it's the year 1910, the OTO definitely exists. Karl Kellner died by 1905 and it's being led by Theodor Reuss now. It includes a initiatory arm and a religious arm, the EGC. However, the EGC is still, even if it's very esoteric and occult, ultimately Christian, and the initiatory arm is still very heavily Masonic. That is because the OTO, as all of us know it now, is very much the byproduct of Aleister Crowley, and Aleister Crowley isn't going to join the OTO until 1910, so I need to get you caught up on his history and what he's been doing up until this time. So let's start with the question. Who exactly is Aleister Crowley? Well, aside from being fever for pop culture icons from the 70s until now, he's just an Englishman. Now, when I say he's just an Englishman, I don't mean to diminish all of his capacity and all of his greatness. I mean, to begin the story quite simply, he's a man who's born in the United Kingdom. He is born to aggressively religious parents of the Plymouth Brethren sect, and they happen to have a rather interesting way of looking at the Bible, and it will affect Aleister Crowley. So Plymouth Brethren have a tendency to rely heavily on the Bible, but they do have a sort of love for personal prophecy in the sense that God can talk to you in the moment, and they also have a real fixation on the end times. In fact, this end time fixation will cause Aleister Crowley's mother to call him the devil and the beast 666 when he begins to rebel later in his life. Ultimately, he seemed to love being a contrarian, so her calling him these names had no effect except giving him a ultimate star to shoot for. Fine, you think I'm the devil? I'll be the devil, Mom. Seemed to be his ultimate response to her. Now, don't get me wrong, Crowley was definitely a difficult child, and he was made difficult specifically because at the age of 11, he inherited a third of his father's wealth because that's when his dad died, and due to English law at the time, he got to just use the wealth, not his mother. So he had a great deal of wealth and not necessarily a large amount of maturity. However, even though he was so rambunctious, he did successfully attend Cambridge University from the years 1895 until 1898. In case you're wondering what he studied, it was philosophy. Now, let me make it very clear that during this time, he is not an occultist. However, it is during his college years that he will not only experiment heavily with a number of things, but it is during this time that he will have his first mystical experience, and most biographers think that it's due to the first homosexual experience that he had in his life. This experience of his occurred during the December holidays, and he was in Stockholm. It was the year 1896. I'll cover it in more detail in my video that's going to be specifically about Aleister Crowley, but all you need to know is that this experience is what sets his occult life in motion. 2 years later, in the year 1898, he'll come across the first occult books that we definitely know he read. One of them was A.E. White's Black Magic and Pax, and the other was Karl von Eckarthausen's The Cloud Upon the Sanctuary. A little bit after encountering these books, and in the same year, he would eventually drop out of Cambridge without actually being given a degree in philosophy, even though, according to records, he actually was doing quite well as a student up until this time. This, however, wouldn't be a real setback for him because he's got that inheritance. It's going to get him through most of the early part of his life, and his chronic money problems aren't going to begin until after becoming a real part of the occult scene. Also, it's specifically during this time off that he's going to be able to go on certain travels that begin the occult career with the Golden Dawn. So, after having left school, it's still the year 1898, he is going to make his way to Switzerland. It is during his time in Switzerland that he will meet a man named Julian Baker, and the two of them apparently are really interested in alchemy, and that's where their friendship will begin. Now, later that same year in 1898, Baker, who also happened to be the brother-in-law of George Cecil Jones, would introduce George Jones to Crowley, and this is significant because Cecil Jones is a member of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. He was initiated into the order in November of the same year by Samuel Mathers at the Isis Urania temple that happened to be held at Mathers' original Masonic lodge, which happens to be London's Mark Master Mason Hall. Now, his time with this group would actually be rather short-lived because by 1900 he and Mathers are going to be kicked out because both of their personalities just don't work with the people who are actually in charge of the order. This will serve as a blow to Mathers and simply a stepping stone to Aleister Crowley. From here, he's going to travel for a couple of years. He will visit Mexico, he will go throughout Europe, Asia, various other places, but what matters is when he gets to Egypt with his new wife, Rose Kelly. Aleister Crowley and Rose met in the year 1903, and he married her mostly as a way for her to escape an arranged marriage and to piss her parents off. However, for such a marriage, the two of them actually got on pretty well. So they'll get married in the year 1903, as I mentioned, and then in 1904, the two of them decide to take a nice honeymoon, so to say, to Egypt, and they decide to pretend to be a prince and a princess while they're staying there, just to add a little bit more spice to it all. Now, according to anybody who knew Rose at the time, she wasn't that into the occult, which is interesting considering this is the guy she chose to escape the marriage with. However, they apparently got along pretty well, even though she didn't share this particular interest of his. While in Egypt, Aleister Crowley didn't want to waste the opportunity to perform some rituals. For one of these rituals, he was actually able to get Rose to participate, even though, like I said, she really wasn't into it. According to Crowley's account, on March 18th, they performed a ritual and he attempted to invoke particular Egyptian deities, and at a certain point, Rose says, "They are waiting for you." Later, on March 18th, of the year 1904, while they're in Egypt, she says that they was actually the god Horus. And 2 days later, on the 20th, she said that the equinox of the gods has come. She then leads him to a nearby museum and shows him a particular stele. This stele is the stele of Kanakansu, and what makes this significant to Aleister Crowley is, of all of the numbers that it had within the exhibit, this was exhibit number 666, so he took it to be particularly profound. Again, as I mentioned earlier, in a sort of contrarian way, he grew to associate himself in a positive light with the beast and the satanic characters of the Book of Revelations. Anyhow, this sets the stage for the Book of the Law, or Liber al vel Legis, to finally be revealed. Following further instructions from Rose, Crowley prepares himself to receive revelation on 3 consecutive days between the hours of noon and 1 p.m. These revelations began on the 8th of April of the same year. According to Aleister Crowley, the person doing the revealing was a spiritual entity known as Iwaz, who happened to be the herald or the mouthpiece of Horus. In particular, Horus as his manifestation as Ra-Hor-Khuit, the divine child. Now, since this video isn't meant to serve as a biography of Aleister Crowley, I'm going to skip a little bit here, but sufficing to say, after writing the Book of the Law, he doesn't immediately publish it, and instead will grow as an occultist. He will develop more skills in the magical arts, he will divorce Rose Kelly, but he ultimately won't do anything with the Lima just yet. Let me get to the part of the story where it becomes a real driving force in his life. He would finally publish the Book of the Law in the year 1909 as part of a collection of holy books of Thelema. It, however, wouldn't be published as its own independent text for a few more years. In fact, the next time that it would be published separately from this was in the year 1913 as part of the Equinox magazine that Aleister Crowley had been putting out ever so often. In terms of content, the Book of the Law contains an introduction that is 5 chapters long, and then the main body of the book, which is 3 chapters long. The introduction was not divinely revealed, but according to Thelemites, the following 3 chapters were. These particular chapters were revealed to Aleister Crowley over 3 days from noon to 1 p.m., and they were revealed by an entity that called itself Iwaz. Ultimately, Crowley would begin to associate Iwaz with his own holy guardian angel. The 3 revealed chapters are ultimately connected to 3 gods, the first being Nuit, then Hadit, then Ra-Hor-Khuit. In ancient Egypt, Nuit was the goddess of the sky. Within Thelema, this is kept, but she is also considered to be the goddess of everything, of totality, of every possible choice a man could make. She is the great womb from which all men spring and from which everything ultimately comes from. She is the generator of all things. Also within the religion of Thelema, she is considered from a scientific perspective to be the totality of space-time. Following that, there is the god Hadit, who is considered to be, in a scientific sense, a point within space-time. He's the choice, he's the moment, he's you, he's the individual, so to say. He's not the totality, he's the little things within it. Together, these 2 beings have a child, the crowned and conquering child, or Ra-Hor-Khuit, Horus of the horizon. He is the amalgamation of the opposites. He is the magical work personified. He is the aspirant in the sense of the magician and the completed self, not what we are right now, but what we finally wish to be. Anyhow, that's just my uninitiated opinion on those three entities, and that basically makes up the Book of the Law. I heavily encourage you to read it, and it makes up the bedrock of the religion of Thelema, which ultimately becomes the bedrock of OTO rituals and philosophy. Anyhow, we're now at the part of the story where another recap is necessary. So, let's go to the beginning. You now know that the OTO is made up of two organizations, the MMM and the EGC. You know that the MMM is the initiatory side of the OTO, and that at this point in history, until the year 1910, it's going to be aggressively Masonic when it comes to that. You also know that at this time the EGC is more Christian-based, even if it is very esoteric and occult. Moving on, you also have a brief idea of who Aleister Crowley is, the type of man that he was, and what he was interested in. You know that he received what he considered revelation from a spiritual entity, and with it he writes a holy book that he calls the Book of the Law, and this book will establish the religion or philosophy of Thelema. Now, all of this is going to come crashing together when Aleister Crowley joins the OTO. Now, there is disagreement about the exact year in which Aleister Crowley and Theodor Reuss met, but none of the biographers disagree that Reuss and Crowley met for the following reason, and they met because Reuss had read The Book of Lies, which was a recent publication of Crowley's that Reuss thought revealed several secrets of the OTO very explicitly. Now, since we know that this book was written in either the year 1912 or 1913, I'm going to declare that they must have met in one of those years because it was because of the book's publication that Reuss sought out Aleister Crowley. During this confrontation, Crowley is able to convince Theodor Reuss that he pulled a Manly P. Hall, and no, I had no idea what the secrets actually were because I was a member. I just happened to be such a good occultist that I figured them out all on my own. This causes Theodor Reuss to gain a great amount of respect for Aleister Crowley, and he initiates him into the 9th degree of the OTO. Shortly thereafter, Crowley was eventually given the 10th degree, and he was appointed as the outer head of the order. Specifically, he was called the Supreme and Holy King of Ireland, Ionia, and all the Britons. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, there is some disagreement between the various biographers about the exact order that some of these events take place in, but what matters to us as people who are looking at the OTO right now is the following. By the year 1911, due to the fact that he had been given permission by Theodor Reuss, Aleister Crowley took it upon himself to produce a manifesto for the MMM. I haven't been successful in finding a version of this manifesto. I've only been able to find one from the year 1919, and that matters because there's a bit of a change that occurs within the OTO. In the year 1913, Aleister Crowley is going to compose the Gnostic Mass, and this is the main public and private ritual of the OTO. Like I said, if you're going to encounter them, it's probably going to be at a Gnostic Mass these days. It would be in the year 1914, when World War I broke out, that Aleister Crowley would go, you know what, I'm going to move to the United States, and during the same time he finally integrates the religion of Thelema into the OTO system, and then in the next year, 1915, he has created revised rituals for use in the MMM ritual initiations. However, even with all of these revisions, the OTO is still a very Masonic system, and this is because in the year 1917, Reuss writes something called the Synopsis of Degrees of OTO, and it very much makes it clear that the early degrees, the first three, are the Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason degrees. He further goes on to call the 4th degree at this time the Holy Royal Arch of Enoch, and he discusses how it is equivalent to the degree of the Knights of St. Andrew or the Royal Arch. Adding more to the Masonic connection, in the year 1919, Crowley actually tries to make this Masonic-based OTO work in the city of Detroit, Michigan. However, the Council of the Scottish Rite within that area says no. It's too close to what Masonic ritual is. It's basically a violation of our Constitution, and we're going to have to say no. We're not going to allow you to present this as a Masonic system within this area. And it's because of this that Crowley is going to actually do the following. He's going to take the first 3 degrees of the OTO system that Reuss describes as the Entered Apprentice, Fellow Craft, and Master Mason degrees, and he's going to remove the Masonic connections from those rituals. I think he does this so that people who are within the Masonic fraternity won't have an issue joining the OTO, but that's just my opinion. It is stated that he doesn't change the rituals of the 4th degree, which would imply that the 4th degree ritual would still be connected to the Royal Arch degrees of Masonry, and that's kind of interesting if that's true. Anyhow, that is how we get to the OTO that we know today, at least without me going on about its history. There is much more that I could say about that, but I believe I'm going to save that for a different video that's specifically about OTO history. This video, as I stated in the beginning, is about whether or not you would want to join the order, or even if you should give them a visit and learn what they're about. To make a long story short, the OTO after this point will continue to do its best. Aleister Crowley will continue to write and develop the system of Thelema. He eventually passes away, as shall all of us, and his replacements will continue to do their best to lead the order, and today it is a multinational organization with branches in the UK, Australia, and America. Those are the ones with grand lodges, and throughout the world there are a number of other OTO outfits that are doing their best to promote the law of Thelema. But with all of that stated, I'd like to actually get into what do these people believe and do, and what would it mean to join this group now that you know where they come from. Before I continue on, there is a final piece of history that we need to go over, and that's Pascal Beverly Randolph and his magical theories. The reason we need to discuss this is his theories specifically revolve around erotic esotericism or sexual magic. It was Randolph's opinion that the moment of orgasm was the most intense and powerful experience a human being could have because it was the moment that their soul suddenly opened to the divine and the breath of God came into them. He was quoted as saying, "True sex power is God power." Furthermore, he believed that magic and prayer were only effective when both of the partners reached simultaneous orgasm. These particular theories were taken in by a group that ended up calling itself the Hermetic Brotherhood of Light or Hermetic Brotherhood of Luxor. Although this group fails to survive for very long, its teachings end up influencing Karl Kellner and Theodor Reuss, and through them they become instrumentally parts of the OTO. So with that, I can now really begin talking about what the OTO believes, and as you can see at its core is a theory of sexual magic. This requires me to, address a question that I've been asked a few times, and no, this doesn't mean that OTO members are actively all having sex with each other or sleeping together. It just means that they consider magic to be a high expression of the sexual act, or you could say they consider the sexual act to be the highest expression of magic. The best way to explain this is through the Thelemic formula or through the magical formula of 0 equals 2. You see, within their system, they consider the male and the female to also be conceptualized as the positive and the negative, or as a +1 and a -1. If you think of these concepts in this manner, the positive one is one quality, the negative one is another quality, and therefore you've got 2. However, when you bring them together, since one is positive and one is negative, they equal 0. And it's this annihilationism through the reconciliation of opposites that the OTO tries to teach its members. In a sort of Buddhist approach, they attempt to show that the differentiation we make on this side of the veil is ultimately an illusion. The OTO also exists to help people discover and perform their true will, which is described within the Book of the Law. The reason you're trying to discover your true will within this system is that it leads to the completion of the great work. Now, what are both of these things? True will is, according to the Thelemic approach to magic, the manifestation of your particular purpose on Earth. They believe that every time a human soul incarnates, it incarnates for a very particular reason. The great work is simply the carrying out of this true will once it's discovered. If you can do this throughout your entire life and do it successfully, you are considered to have accomplished the great work. The great work is sometimes described in a mystical sense as knowledge and conversation with your holy guardian angel. The guardian angel is described as both a part of ourselves, a truer self that we only access through magic and meditation, and it's also conceptualized as a separate entity from ourselves, something that guides us to the true will and helps us accomplish the great work. The great work can be defined as more than a moment, because if you look at how the expression is used, knowledge and conversation is more than a moment and is somewhat ongoing. The process of performing one's true will and accomplishing the great work requires a daily struggle in which a person overcomes themselves and makes an active effort to be the best person they can be. Some people might consider this explanation a little bit basic, however, it serves the purpose of helping you understand what the OTO is trying to get you to do if you're an outsider and trying to figure out if you should join or not. I also want to make it clear, since I haven't outright said it, the sexual magic techniques that they teach aren't taught until much later, so somebody who just joined the order would not find themselves doing this. Now that I've said that, let's see what they themselves have to say about what they do and how they're going to help you. According to their website, the order offers esoteric instruction through dramatic ritual, guidance in a system of illuminated ethics, and fellowship among aspirants to the great work of realizing the divine in the human. In terms of activities that the order takes part in, here are some of them. The OTO puts on lectures, classes, social events, theatrical productions, art exhibitions, they publish books, journals, and they provide instruction in hermetic science, yoga, and magic. They are also, according to Crowley in his Confessions, in possession of one supreme secret. The whole of their system is directed towards communicating this to their members. They accomplish this by performing two main ritual activities, and that's initiation into the mysteries and celebration of Liber 15, which is the Gnostic Mass. If you want to know a little bit about the initiations, they're broken up into various triads, so let me explain the structure of the degrees within the order right now. First, there's the Man of Earth triad that begins with Minerval, Man and Brother, Magician, Master Magician, Perfect Magician, and Companion of the Holy Royal Arch of Enoch. After that, there's the Perfect Initiate or Prince of Jerusalem, which is sort of a sub-degree of the fourth degree. After that, there's what's considered to be outside of the triads, and that's the Knight of the East and West. After this, we get to the second triad, which is called the Lover's Triad. It's broken down into 3 degrees, the 5th, 6th, and 7th. And as you can see, it's broken down into various sub-degrees, many of them relating to Masonic orders or Rosicrucian concepts. After this, we have the Hermit Triad, which includes the 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th degrees. You are most likely going to stop at the 9th degree if you were going to work all the way up, because the degrees after the 9th are very much administrative degrees. For instance, the 10th degree, or the degree of Rex Summus Sanctissimus, is the Most Holy King. That's the leader of the OTO within a nation, and for the United States, that's Sabazius. He's also known as William Breeze, and he used to be in the band Coil, in case you're wondering where he comes from. So now that you know how it's broken down, let me explain to you what they think this breakdown does for you as an initiate. First, here's what Crowley had to say about the entire system. It offers a rational basis for universal brotherhood and for universal religion. It puts forward a scientific statement which is a summary of all that is at present known about the universe by means of a simple yet sublime symbolism artistically arranged. It also enables each man to discover for himself his personal destiny, indicates the moral and intellectual qualities which he requires in order to fulfill it freely, and finally puts in his hands an unimaginably powerful weapon that he can use to develop in himself every faculty which he will need for his work. So that's a pretty big promise. Now let's see what he says about the first set of initiations. The main objects of the instructions are 2. It is first necessary to explain the universe and the relations of human life therein. Secondly, to instruct every man and woman how best to adapt his or her life to the cosmos and to develop his faculties to the utmost advantage. I accordingly constructed a series of rituals: Minerval, Man, Magician, Master Magician, Perfect Magician, and Perfect Initiate, which should illustrate the course of human life in its largest philosophical aspect. He then goes on to say about the degrees from 5th onward, the candidate is instructed in the value of discretion, loyalty, independence, truthfulness, courage, self-control, indifference to circumstance, impartiality, skepticism, and other virtues, and at the same time assisted him to discover for himself the nature of the supreme secret, the proper object of its employment, and the best means for ensuring success of its use. As such, membership within the OTO is based on receiving these ceremonies or degrees. They happen through ritual dramas, and they establish bonds of fraternity by giving a shared experience. All degrees, like the rituals of Freemasonry, involve the swearing of an oath and the keeping of secrecy. They also require ritualized drama, as stated before. Now again, all of this is being done in the hope that you will develop your truest sense of self and you will become who you were meant to be, i.e., accomplishing the great work. Should one wish to progress further than the 2nd degree, one must become a deacon within the EGC. In a sense, one must work through both ranks in both the Mysteria Mystica Maxima and the Iglesia Gnostica Catholica in order to advance fully within the OTO. So I suppose you could shorthand it in saying they are making a group of priest magicians that are devoted to the religion of Thelema, founded again by Aleister Crowley through revelation in Egypt within the year 1904. Now, if this sounds interesting to you and you're wondering how you actually join, the best way is to begin attending a OTO body near you if there is one, and celebrating the Gnostic Mass with its members. After you go for enough times, you will eventually be offered the opportunity to join as a Minerval or 0 degree member, as it's also called. This rank allows you to basically be an honored and invited guest and lets you really decide if this is going to be for you or not. It also allows the Order to decide the same thing. If you have any questions, I heavily encourage you to make use of their Grand Lodge's website for either the United States, the United Kingdom, or Australia. They are in countries aside from those 3, but these are the ones that have the best working system because they all have Grand Lodges that can respond more readily to your communication and needs. This doesn't mean you shouldn't join a body if you're not within one of these countries. In fact, you should make an effort to join if you're not within one of these nations, because you can help make the OTO grow in this manner. There always has to be a first underfunded group, so to say. So, if you would like to learn Kabbalah, Hermetic Sciences, and magic within this particular context and with this particular group of people, now that you know everything about them, I hope that you feel comfortable doing so. Remember, this is not the only group that you can join that happens to be involved with the religion of the Lima, and it is not the only group that will teach you magic, Kabbalah, and various other esoteric or occult arts. It, however, isn't a very bad order to join, and it's made up of some very good people. Like any group, it's got its bad apples. Masonry isn't perfect either. There are plenty of people who are imperfect in every group in the world. However, to judge a group simply by the few who are not perfect would be to miss the beauty that can be found within any organization. Now, something I should point out when it comes to any group like this, joining them is very much what you make of it. Your experience will be what you put into it. You could have an awful time in the OTO, an excellent time in the Golden Dawn, and it will all mostly be up to what you do. I hope I've done a good job of answering the question, why would I want to join the OTO and what exactly is it? If you have any further questions relating to any of the topics I brought up here, please leave them in the comments below. Also, never feel afraid to ask me to cover a particular thing in more detail in a separate video. There are many things that I bring up in each video, and I don't have the time to go into detail on everything. However, this truth is a fundamental truth of the spiritual journey. If you're only going to act spiritual but never put in the real work, then you're never going to see true results and you're going to stay where you began. If you're looking to change who you are and become a better person, it's possible to do this on your own. However, many of us find it easier to do it with help, and I just want to point out that if you like the advice I give, I'm here to offer help myself. On my website, www.enplectures.com, it is also possible to book me for spiritual counseling or guidance if that's something that you feel you would benefit from. Aside from perhaps listening to me on this podcast and liking what I have to say, I'd like to remind some people that I happen to be a licensed minister within the state of California. I hold a religious studies degree from UC Santa Barbara, and I've been doing this for more than 10 years, so I think I can be helpful. Also, I believe in being allowed to try something before you commit to it. It is possible to book a free session with me and then decide to do anything beyond that. These sessions can be online or in person. It's entirely up to you and how far you actually are from me, since I live in Southern California. Since I've been doing a good job of talking about it without explaining it too much, my next episode will discuss theories of magic, ending with my own, and I hope to see you there. Like always, if you have any questions relating to either what magic is, the history of it, the theories of it, please leave them in the comments below so that I can include those answers in the upcoming video.